Jake Harrison wiped the sweat from his forehead as he finished loading the last piece of salvaged metal into his cargo hold. The derelict ship he had been working on for 3 days was finally stripped clean of anything valuable. His small salvage vessel, the Lucky Strike, was now packed with enough scrap to keep him fed for a month. The work was hard and dirty, but Jake preferred it this way. Out here in the empty space between stars, nobody asked questions about his past. Nobody cared that he used to wear a military uniform, or that his hands had once held weapons instead of cutting torches. He was just another salvager trying to make a living in the vast darkness of space. Jake sealed the cargo hold and walked to his ship's bridge. Through the main window, he could see the massive bulk of Kepler Station rotating slowly against the backdrop of stars. The station was his next stop. He needed to sell his salvage and pick up supplies before heading to his next job, as Jake prepared his ship for departure. He did not notice the sleek hunter vessel watching him from behind a nearby asteroid. Inside that ship, something very dangerous was studying his every move. Zaraketh pressed her scaled hand against the viewing screen and watched the human's small ship power up its engines. Her yellow eyes tracked every detail of the vessel's design and movement patterns. She had been observing this particular human for 2 days, learning his habits and routines. The contract datapad beside her displayed Jake Harrison's image and basic information. Age 32, former military, though most of his service record was classified, currently working as an independent salvage operator. The bounty on his head was unusually large for such a seemingly ordinary human. Zaraketh had been hunting sentient beings across the galaxy for over a decade. She belonged to the Vorthok species, a race of natural predators who had earned their place in the galactic community through their skills as trackers and enforcers. Her reputation was flawless. She had never failed to deliver a target, and she did not intend to start now. The anonymous client who had hired her had been very specific. Jake Harrison must be taken alive and unharmed. The reasons were not explained, and Zaraketh did not ask. She was paid to hunt, not to question. Her ship's computer chimed softly as Jake's vessel moved away from the derelict and set course for Kepler Station. Zaraketh activated her own engines but kept her distance. Humans were supposedly clever for primitive beings, but they were still far inferior to Vorthok senses and technology. Jake docked at Kepler Station 3 hours later. The massive trading post was a maze of corridors, shops, and living quarters built into what had once been a hollow asteroid. Thousands of beings from dozens of species lived and worked there, making it the perfect place for someone to disappear if they wanted to. But Jake did not seem to be hiding. He walked through the station's main corridor like he owned the place, nodding to other traders and stopping to chat with a few acquaintances. His movements were casual and unhurried. Either he was very good at pretending, or he truly had no idea that he was being hunted. Zaraketh followed at a safe distance, her advanced camouflage suit making her nearly invisible in the crowded corridors. She watched Jake conduct his business at the scrap dealer's booth, selling his salvage for a fair price. He bought supplies at the general store, fuel for his ship, and a hot meal at one of the station's restaurants. Everything about Jake's behavior suggested a man with nothing to hide. He was polite to the vendors, generous with tips, and seemed genuinely friendly to everyone he met. Several humans recognized him and stopped to talk. He appeared to be well-liked and respected among the trading community. This confused Zaraketh. In her experience, beings with large bounties on their heads were usually criminals, rebels, or fugitives. They acted nervous and paranoid, constantly looking over their shoulders. Jake Harrison acted like a man without a care in the world. She decided to test him. While Jake was eating his meal at the restaurant, Zaraketh moved to a position where she could observe him directly. She allowed her camouflage to flicker slightly, just enough for someone with sharp eyes to notice. Most humans would miss such a subtle sign, but trained military personnel might catch it. Jake continued eating his food, seemingly oblivious to her presence. He finished his meal, paid his bill, and walked back toward the docking bay where his ship waited. Zaraketh followed, still maintaining her distance. As Jake prepared to leave the station, something unexpected happened. Group of armed thugs approached him in the docking bay. They were clearly pirates or criminals of some kind, and they did not look friendly. "You're Jake Harrison," the leader of the group said. It was not a question. "That's right," Jake replied calmly. "Something I can help you with." "Word is you found something valuable on that derelict ship," the thug continued. "Something worth more than scrap metal." Jake shook his head. "I'm afraid you've been misinformed. I'm just a salvager. I find old metal and sell it. Nothing more exciting than that." Thug leader laughed. "We'll see about that. Boys search." His ship. This was interesting. Zarakith remained hidden and watched as the situation developed. She had not expected Jake to have other enemies, but it might work to her advantage. If the pirates weakened him or damaged his ship, it would make her job easier, but Jake did not seem worried. As the thugs moved toward his ship, he stepped into their path. "I'm going to have to ask you not to do that," he said politely. "What are you going to do to stop us?" The leader sneered. What happened next surprised everyone, including Zar Kaith. Moved with sudden, explosive speed, his hand shot out and struck the leader in the throat, dropping him to the ground, gasping for air. Before the other thugs could react, Jake had already moved again. He disarmed one attacker, used that weapon to stun another, and disabled the third with a precise strike to a nerve cluster. The entire fight lasted less than 10 seconds. Jake stood over the unconscious pirates, not even breathing heavily. Station. Security arrived moments later, alerted by witnesses to the disturbance. They took the thugs into custody and asked Jake if he wanted to press charges. "No need," Jake said with a friendly smile. "Just a misunderstanding. I'm sure they'll think twice before bothering honest traders again." The security officers nodded and dragged the pirates away. Jake boarded his ship and departed the station as if nothing unusual had happened. Zarakith watched his ship disappear into hyperspace and felt a strange sensation she had never experienced before. For the first time in her hunting career, she was not entirely certain about her target. Jake Harrison was clearly not the simple salvager he appeared to be. His combat skills were far too advanced for a civilian trader. His calm reaction to danger and the precision of his movements suggested extensive military training. But if he was so skilled, why was he living such a mundane life? More importantly, why had he allowed himself to be tracked so easily? Zarakith put Jake's destination into her navigation computer and prepared to follow. The hunt was just beginning, and she was starting to suspect that this particular human might be more interesting than she had originally thought. As her ship entered hyperspace, she made a mental note to be more careful. Something about Jake Harrison did not fit the pattern of her usual targets. Whether that made him more dangerous or simply more challenging remained to be seen. Either way, she would find out soon enough. 3 months had passed since Zarakith began hunting Jake Harrison. In that time, she had followed him across 12 different star systems, through dangerous asteroid fields, past pirate territories, and into regions of space where few civilized beings dared to travel. The human continued to act like nothing unusual was happening. He took salvage jobs, traded with merchants, and even helped other travelers who found themselves in trouble. But Zarakith was beginning to notice things that made her uneasy. Jake's routes were becoming more and more dangerous. It seemed to choose jobs that took him through the most hazardous parts of space. At first, Zarakith thought this was just bad luck or poor planning. But as the pattern continued, she started to wonder if there was something else going on. She was currently hiding behind a large piece of space debris. Watching Jake work on another derelict ship near the edge of pirate territory, her sensors showed several hostile vessels in the area. But Jake seemed completely unconcerned about the danger as she watched. 3 pirate ships suddenly appeared from behind a nearby moon. They moved quickly to surround Jake's small salvage vessel, cutting off any escape routes. Zarakith tensed, ready to intervene if necessary. She needed Jake alive, and dead pirates were no use to anyone. But once again, Jake surprised her, instead of panicking or trying to run. Jake activated his ship's communication system and began speaking to the pirates in their own language. Zarakith's translator picked up the conversation, and she realized Jake was negotiating with them. "I have information about a Federation supply convoy," Jake was saying. lightly armed, carrying medical supplies and food. They'll be passing through the Vegas system in 2 days. The pirate leader seemed interested. What do you want in return? Safe passage through your territory, Jake replied, and maybe some fuel if you can spare it. The pirates agreed to the deal, and even gave Jake coordinates for a hidden fuel depot. They departed as quickly as they had arrived, leaving Jake alone to continue his work. Zaraketh was confused. How did a simple salvager know about Federation convoy routes? And why was he trading that information to pirates? Was Jake some kind of criminal after all? She decided to follow the convoy route Jake had mentioned to see what would happen. 2 days later, she watched from a safe distance as the 3 Federation ships passed through the Vegas system exactly as Jake had predicted. The pirates never attacked. Instead, they followed the convoy at a distance and helped escort it safely through several dangerous areas. It made no sense. Pirates were supposed to attack and rob convoys, not protect them. But somehow Jake had convinced them to act as guardians instead of predators. The next month brought more strange incidents. Jake led her through a region of space controlled by the Rozek Syndicate, a group of alien criminals known for their cruelty. Instead of avoiding them, Jake made contact and offered to help them locate some missing cargo. Zaraketh watched as Jake guided the Rozek to an abandoned space station where their stolen goods were hidden. When they arrived, they found the cargo had already been recovered by Federation security forces. The Rozek were furious until Jake pointed out that the real thieves were a rival criminal group who had been using the station as their base. The Rozek ended up thanking Jake for helping them identify their enemies and gave him safe passage through their territory. Another potential threat had been turned into an ally through Jake's mysterious knowledge and negotiation skills. By the 4th month, Zaraketh was starting to feel like she was losing her mind. Every time Jake entered a dangerous situation, he somehow found a way to turn it to his advantage. He never seemed surprised by anything, never showed fear, and always had information or solutions that should have been impossible for a simple salvager to possess. She decided to take a more direct approach. Zaraketh had been studying Jake's travel patterns and realized he often stopped at a small trading station called Haven's Rest. The station was built into a large asteroid and served as a neutral meeting place for traders, smugglers, and other travelers who wanted to avoid official Federation oversight. She arrived at Haven's Rest 3 days before Jake was scheduled to appear. This time, instead of hiding and watching, she decided to make contact. The station's main bar was crowded with beings from dozens of different species. Zaraketh found a table in a dark corner where she could observe the entrance and waited. Her camouflage suit was deactivated, allowing others to see her clearly. She wanted Jake to know she was there. When Jake walked into the bar, he looked exactly like he always did. Calm, friendly, and completely relaxed. He bought a drink and found an empty table on the opposite side of the room. For several minutes, he simply sat there enjoying his beverage and watching the other patrons. Then, without warning, he looked directly at Zaraketh and smiled. It was not a friendly smile. It was the smile of someone who knew a secret that others did not. Jake raised his glass in a small salute and took a sip of his drink. Zaraketh felt her blood run cold. He knew. Somehow, Jake Harrison knew exactly who she was and why she was there. She stood up and walked across the bar toward his table. Other patrons moved out of her way, recognizing the predatory grace of a Vorthok hunter. But Jake did not seem intimidated, simply watched her approach with that same mysterious smile. "Jake Harrison," she said as she reached his table. "Zaraketh, of the Vorthok clan Shadowstrike," he replied. "I've been wondering when you'd finally decide to introduce yourself." The use of her full clan name shocked her. Very few beings outside her own species knew about Vorthok naming traditions. How could a human salvager know such information? "Know why I'm here," she said, taking the seat across from him. "I have a pretty good idea," Jake replied. "Someone paid you to bring me in alive. The question is, do you know who hired you and why?" Zaraketh hesitated. She had tried to investigate her mysterious client several times, but all her inquiries had led to dead ends. The payment had come through untraceable channels, and the contact information had been encrypted beyond her ability to decode. Identity of my client is not your concern, she said finally. Jake laughed. That's where you're wrong. See, Zaraketh, I know exactly who hired you. I also know why they want me captured. I know what they plan to do with you once this job is finished. What are you talking about? Your client isn't interested in me, Jake said. I'm just the bait. The real target of this operation is you. Arakitha's hand moved instinctively toward her weapon, but Jake held up a hand to stop her. Think about it, he continued. Why would someone pay such a large bounty for a simple salvager? Why send one of the galaxy's most skilled hunters after such an apparently easy target? And why have you been led through increasingly dangerous regions of space, far from any backup or support? Questions hit Zaraketh like physical blows. She'd been so focused on the hunt that she had not considered the bigger picture. Now that Jake pointed it out, the pattern was obvious. Someone wants you dead, Jake said quietly, and they're using me to get you into position for an assassination. The question is, are you going to let them succeed, or are you going to trust me to help you survive? Before Zaraketh could answer, alarms began blaring throughout the station. Emergency lights flashed red, and the station's automated voice announced that hostile ships were approaching. Jake stood up and looked toward the bar's main entrance. Right on schedule, he said. Your would-be killers have arrived. The alarms continued to blare as Zaraketh stared at Jake in disbelief. Her mind was racing, trying to process what he had just told her. Before she could respond, the lights in the bar flickered and went out completely. Emergency power kicked. In a few seconds later, bathing everything in a dim red glow, the other patrons in the bar were shouting and running toward the exits, but Jake remained perfectly calm. We need to move, he said, standing up from his chair. They'll be boarding. The station soon? Who will be boarding? Zaraketh demanded. The same people who hired you to hunt me, Jake replied. Come on, I'll explain everything once we're somewhere safe. Against her better judgment, Zaraketh followed Jake out of the bar. The station's corridors were filled with panicking civilians trying to reach the escape pods or their ships. Jake moved through the chaos like he knew exactly where he was going. They reached a maintenance shaft that led to the lower levels of the station. Jake opened the hatch and gestured for Zaraketh to go first. She hesitated for a moment, then climbed down into the narrow tunnel. Jake followed close behind, sealing the hatch after them. The maintenance tunnels were dark and cramped, but Jake navigated them without any difficulty. He led Zaraketh through a maze of pipes and electrical conduits until they reached a small storage room deep in the station's core. This should buy us some time, Jake said, activating a small light device. The room is shielded against most sensors, and they won't think to look for us down here. Zaraketh drew her weapon and pointed it at Jake. Start talking. Who are you really, and how do you know so much about my mission? Jake looked at the weapon calmly, showing no fear. My name really is Jake Harrison, and I really am a salvager. But you're right that there's more to the story. He sat down on a storage crate and continued speaking. I used to work for Earth's Military Intelligence Division. My job was to study alien species and learn about their cultures, psychology, and military capabilities. I spent years learning about the Vorthok, among others. That doesn't explain how you know about my client, Zaraketh said, keeping her weapon trained on him. I know about your client because I've been investigating them for months, Jake replied. They're not just after you, Zaraketh. They've been hiring hunters from different species to eliminate specific targets. You're just the latest in a long line. What targets? What are you talking about? Jake pulled out a small data pad and activated it. The screen showed a list of names and species. These are all hunters who have disappeared over the past 2 years. All of them were given contracts similar to yours. All of them were led into dangerous situations and never seen again. Zaraketh studied the list. She recognized several of the names. They were all skilled hunters with excellent reputations. The idea that they had all been eliminated was disturbing. Why would someone want to kill hunters? She asked. Because someone is planning something big, Jake said. Something that requires the galaxy's best trackers and enforcers to be out of the picture. My guess is they're preparing for some kind of large-scale criminal operation. The station shook, violently as something impacted the hull. Jake checked his datapad and frowned. They're cutting through the outer barrier. We don't have much time. If what you're saying is true, then who hired me? Zaraketh demanded. A group calling themselves the Shadow Consortium, Jake replied. They're a collection of criminal organizations from different species working together. It's very secretive, very dangerous, and very good at covering their tracks. How do you know all this? Jake smiled grimly. Because they tried to recruit me. When I refused, they decided I knew too much to be allowed to live. That's when they hired you to bring me in. But they wanted you alive, Zaraketh pointed out. Only so they could question me about what I knew before killing me, Jake said. The plan was probably to eliminate both of us once they had the information. They wanted. Another impact shook the station, this one much closer. Jake stood up and moved toward a ventilation grate on the far wall. We need to keep moving. Can I trust you to watch my back? Or are you still planning to complete your contract? Zaraketh lowered her weapon. Everything Jake had told her made sense, and it explained the strange feelings she had been having about this mission. Her hunter instincts had been warning her that something was wrong, but her pride had prevented her from listening. I'll help you, she said. But I want proof of what you're claiming. Fair enough, Jake replied, prying open the ventilation grate. I've got evidence stored on my ship. If we can get there alive, I'll show you everything. They crawled through the ventilation system for what felt like hours. Jake seemed to know every twist and turn of the station's internal structure. Finally, they emerged in a docking bay on the opposite side of the station from where Jake's ship was berthed. The bay was filled with sleek black ships that Zaraketh didn't recognize. Armed figures in dark armor were moving between the vessels, clearly searching for something or someone. Shadow Consortium troops, Jake whispered. There. Equipped with military-grade weapons and armor. Very professional, very deadly. How many are there? Zaraketh asked. At least 30 that I can see, Jake replied. Probably more on other parts of the station. They watched as the troops split into smaller groups and began searching the docking bays systematically. It was clear they weren't going to give up easily. My ship is 3 bays over, Jake said. We'll have to go through the main corridor to reach it. And that corridor will be crawling with their people, Zaraketh pointed out. No, Jake replied. That's why we're going to create a distraction. Jake pulled out another device from his pack. It looked like a standard emergency beacon, but Zaraketh could see it had been modified somehow. What is that? She asked. A little surprise I prepared for situations like this, Jake said with a grin. It's going to make the station's computer. Systems think there's a massive reactor overload in the lower levels. He activated the device and placed it in a maintenance panel. Within seconds, new alarms began blaring throughout the station. The automated voice announced an emergency evacuation order for all lower decks. The Shadow Consortium troops immediately responded to the emergency, with most of them heading toward the lower levels to investigate. Only a few remained in the docking bay. Now we move, Jake said. They slipped out of their hiding place and made their way through the corridors toward Jake's ship. The few enemies they encountered were easily avoided or quietly eliminated by Zaraketh's superior combat skills. When they reached Jake's docking bay, they found 2 guards standing watch over his ship. Jake signaled for Zaraketh to take the one on the left while he handled the one on the right. The attack was swift and silent. Both guards were unconscious before they could raise an alarm. Jake and Zaraketh boarded his ship and began the launch sequence immediately. They'll try to stop us from leaving, Zaraketh warned. Let them try, Jake replied, powering up the ship's engines. This old salvager has a few tricks they won't be expecting. As the Lucky Strike lifted off from the docking bay, several of the black ships moved to intercept them. But instead of trying to fight or outrun them, Jake did something unexpected. He activated a transponder that identified his ship as a Federation medical vessel on an emergency mission. The Shadow Consortium ships hesitated, not wanting to risk attacking what appeared to be a legitimate rescue ship. That moment of confusion was all Jake needed. He engaged his hyperdrive and jumped to safety, leaving the enemy ships behind. Clever Zaraketh admitted as they entered hyperspace. Sometimes. The best weapon is information, Jake replied. Speaking of which, It's time I showed you that proof you wanted." He led her to a hidden compartment in his ship's cargo hold. Inside were dozens of data storage devices, recording equipment, and what looked like surveillance photos. "This is everything I've gathered about the Shadow Consortium over the past year," Jake said. "Names, locations, financial records, communication intercepts. Enough evidence to bring down their entire operation." Zaraketh studied the materials with growing amazement. The scope of the conspiracy was enormous, involving criminal organizations from dozens of different species across multiple star systems. "Why? Haven't you turned this over to the authorities?" she asked. "Because I don't know who can be trusted," Jake replied. "The consortium has agents everywhere, including inside law enforcement and government agencies. I've been waiting for the right opportunity to expose them safely." Zaraketh looked at Jake with new respect. This human was far more than he appeared to be. Was intelligent, resourceful, and apparently dedicated to protecting innocent beings. From a dangerous criminal conspiracy. "What do you need me to do?" she asked. Jake set course for a remote planet on the edge of known space. The world had no official name, only a designation number that appeared on old Federation survey maps. According to those maps, it was a dead rock with no atmosphere and no valuable resources. "Where are we going?" Zaraketh asked, as she watched the star charts on Jake's navigation screen. "Somewhere safe," Jake replied. "Somewhere we can plan our next move without worrying about being followed." The journey took 2 days. During that time, Zaraketh studied all of Jake's evidence about the Shadow Consortium. The more she learned, the more impressed she became with his investigation skills. He had gathered information that would have been difficult for even the best intelligence agencies to obtain. When they arrived at the planet, Zaraketh was surprised to see that it was not the dead world the maps claimed it to be. The planet had a thin but breathable atmosphere, and her sensors detected signs of plant life and even some small settlements. "The survey maps are wrong," she observed. "Not wrong," Jake said with a smile. "Just outdated. The planet has been terraformed over the past 50 years by a group of human colonists who wanted to live away from the main Federation worlds." Jake landed his ship at a well-hidden facility built into the side of a mountain. As they disembarked, Zaraketh realized this was no simple colonial settlement. The base was clearly designed for military purposes, with advanced sensors, defensive weapons, and communication equipment. "Welcome to Research Station Alpha," Jake said as they walked through the base's main corridor. "This is where I used to work before I became a salvager." The corridors were empty, but Zaraketh could see that the facility had been designed to house hundreds of people. Laboratory equipment lined the walls, and she noticed computer terminals that were still active and monitoring various systems. "What kind of research was done here?" she asked. "Xenopsychology," Jake replied. "The study of alien psychology and behavior patterns." The Federation wanted to understand how different species think and act, both for diplomatic purposes and for military preparedness. They entered a large room filled with displays and holographic projectors. Jake activated one of the main systems, and the room filled with three-dimensional images of various alien species. Zaraketh saw her own people, the Vorthok, represented among them. "We studied dozens of species," Jake continued, "learning about their cultures, their fighting techniques, their social structures, and their psychological weaknesses. The goal was to be prepared for any situation that might arise." Zaraketh walked around the room, examining the displays. The information about her species was incredibly detailed and accurate. It included things that most outsiders would never know about Vorthok society and traditions. "This is how you knew so much about me," she realized. "You've been studying my people for years," among others, Jake confirmed. But the project was shut down when the Federation decided it was too aggressive and might harm diplomatic relations. "Most of the researchers were reassigned to other duties, but you kept working on it." "I kept studying, yes, but not for the Federation. Realized that there were criminal organizations out there who were using similar techniques to exploit and manipulate different species. I decided to use my knowledge to fight them instead." Jake led her deeper into the facility, to a section that looked more like a command center than a research lab. Banks of computers displayed star charts, communication intercepts, and surveillance. Data from across the galaxy. This is where I've been coordinating my investigation of the Shadow Consortium, Jake explained. I've been tracking their activities for over a year, learning about their structure and identifying their key members. Zaraketh studied the displays with growing amazement. Jake had mapped out a criminal network that spanned dozens of star systems and involved hundreds of different organizations. The scope of the conspiracy was even larger than she had imagined. "How did you discover all this?" she asked. "By following the patterns," Jake replied. "Criminal organizations may be secretive, but they still leave traces. Financial transactions, communication patterns, shipping routes, personnel movements. If you know how to look, you can piece together the bigger picture." He activated another display that showed a timeline of recent events. The Shadow Consortium has been growing bolder over the past 2 years. They've been eliminating potential threats to their operations, including law enforcement officials, rival criminals, and skilled hunters like yourself. But why target hunters specifically? Because they're planning something that will require them to operate without interference, Jake said. "My guess is a major heist or attack that would normally bring every hunter in the galaxy after them. By eliminating the best trackers first, they're ensuring they'll have time to complete their mission and escape." Zaraketh nodded slowly. "Made sense from a tactical standpoint. Remove the threats before beginning the main operation. What's their target?" Jay activated a final display that showed a massive space station orbiting a distant planet. "The Galactic Trade Summit," he said. "Representatives from every major species in the galaxy will be gathering. They're in 2 weeks to negotiate new trade agreements. The station will be filled with political leaders, business executives, and enormous amounts of valuable cargo. They're planning to attack the summit or rob it," Jake said. "Either way, it would be the crime of the century. And with most of the galaxy's best hunters dead or missing, they might actually get away with it." Zaraketh stared at the display in horror. The Trade Summit was one of the most important diplomatic events in galactic history. An attack on it could destabilize the entire interstellar community. "We have to stop them," she said. "That's the plan," Jake agreed. "But it won't be easy. The consortium has resources we can't match, and they've been planning this for years. We'll need to be smarter than them, not stronger." "What do you have in mind?" Jake smiled, and Zaraketh recognized the expression. It was the same mysterious smile he had given her back at Haven's Rest. The smile of someone who knew something others did not. "I'm going to use their own tactics against them," he said. "They've been manipulating you and the other hunters by feeding you false information and leading you into traps. Now I'm going to do the same thing to them." "How?" "By giving them exactly what they want," Jake replied. "They want me captured so they can question me about what I know. Fine, I'll let them capture me. But when they do, they'll be walking into a trap of my own design." Zaraketh felt a chill run down her spine. "It's incredibly dangerous. If something goes wrong, they'll kill you. Not if you're there to make sure everything goes according to plan," Jake said. "I need you to pretend that you've completed your original mission. Bring me to the consortium as their prisoner. But instead of handing me over, we'll work together to bring down their entire operation from the inside. Do you want me to betray my client?" "Your client has been planning to kill you from the beginning," Jake pointed out. "This is your chance to turn the tables on them." Zaraketh considered the plan. It was risky, but it might be their only chance to stop the consortium before they could attack the trade summit. And if Jake was right about them planning to eliminate her anyway, she had nothing to lose by fighting back. "What about the other hunters they've targeted?" she asked. "Can we save them too?" "Some of them, maybe," Jake said. "I've been tracking several who are still alive but missing. If we can take down the consortium's leadership, we might be able to find and rescue the survivors." Zaraketh made her decision. "I'll do it. But I want your word that you'll follow my lead once we're inside their organization." "I know how criminal groups like this operate," agreed, Jake said. "But first we need to prepare the consortium. Won't be easy to fool, and we'll only get one chance to make this work." They spent the next several hours planning their infiltration. Jake showed Zaraketh detailed information about the consortium's leadership, their base of operations, and their security procedures. He also gave her access to some of the advanced technology from the research station, including communication, devices, and surveillance equipment. Remember, Jake said, as they finalized their plans, once we start this, there's no going back. The consortium will consider us both enemies, and they won't hesitate to kill us if they discover what we're really doing. I understand, Zaraketh replied, but I've made my choice. These criminals have been using hunters like me as tools for their own purposes. It's time they learned what happens when they try to manipulate a Vorthok. Jake grinned.
Now you're
Thinking like a human? Is that supposed to be a compliment? Among my people, it's the highest compliment there is. The Shadow Consortium's base was hidden inside a massive asteroid in the Omega Nebula. The asteroid looked natural from the outside, but Zaraketh's sensors detected advanced technology buried deep within the rock. As her ship approached the hidden entrance, she felt her heart beating faster. Jake was secured in her cargo hold, apparently unconscious and bound with restraints. To anyone watching, it would look like she had successfully captured her target. But the restraints were fake, and Jake was fully awake and ready to act when the time came. Shadow vessel, approaching Consortium base, identify yourself, came a voice over her communication system. This is Zaraketh of Clan Shadow Strike, she replied. I'm delivering the Harrison target as contracted. Acknowledged. It to docking. Bay 7. You will be met by security personnel. The docking bay was larger than Zaraketh had expected. Dozens of ships were berthed there, ranging from small fighters to massive cargo vessels. Armed guards wearing the same black armor she had seen at Haven's Rest were stationed throughout the area. As soon as her ship touched down, a group of guards approached. Their leader was a tall alien with gray skin and multiple arms. Recognized the species as Calarian, known for their intelligence and ruthless business practices. I am Commander Vex, the alien said, as Zaraketh opened her ship's hatch. We're here to take custody of your prisoner, the contract specified. Payment upon delivery, Zaraketh replied, staying in character. I want to see the credits transferred before I hand him over. Commander Vex smiled, showing sharp teeth, of course. Follow me to the processing center. We'll complete the transaction there. They loaded Jake onto a hover platform and transported him through the asteroid base's corridors. Zaraketh was impressed by the facility's size and organization. The consortium clearly had significant resources and had spent considerable time building this hidden stronghold. The processing center was a large room filled with computer terminals and holding cells. Jake was placed in one of the cells while Zaraketh completed the payment transfer. The whole time she was studying the base's layout and security measures, memorizing everything she could. Excellent work, Commander Vex said as the credits appeared in Zaraketh's account. The director will want to debrief you before you leave. There may be additional contracts available for someone of your skills. I'm always interested in profitable work, Zaraketh replied. Commander Vex led her to an elevator that took them deep into the asteroid's core. The director's office was located in the most secure part of the base, surrounded by multiple layers of security systems and guard stations. The director turned out to be a human woman named Victoria Kane. She was older than Jake, with silver hair and cold blue eyes that seemed to see everything. Zaraketh had read about Kane in Jake's intelligence files. She was a former Federation official who had disappeared several years ago after being accused of corruption. So you're the famous Vorthok hunter? Kane said as they entered her office. I've heard impressive things about your work. I complete my contract, Zaraketh replied simply. Indeed you do. And very efficiently, I might add. It took you longer than expected to bring in Harrison, but I understand he proved to be more resourceful than anticipated. Zaraketh nodded. He had skills beyond what his file indicated. But in the end, every prey animal can be caught. Kane smiled. I like your attitude. In fact, I have a proposition for you. The consortium is always in need of skilled hunters, and we pay much better than the usual bounty boards. What kind of work? Elimination contracts, mostly. We have a list of individuals who pose threats to our operations. People who ask too many questions or interfere with our business. We need someone reliable to make these problems disappear, Zaraketh. pretended to consider the offer. The pay would have to be substantial. I assure you it would be, Kane replied. But first, I need to deal with our current prisoner. Harrison knows far too much about our organization. We need to extract that information before we dispose of him. When will the interrogation begin? Immediately. Would you like to observe? You might find our techniques ... educational. Kane led Zaraketh to an observation room overlooking the interrogation chamber. Through a one-way window, they could see Jake strapped to a chair with various monitoring devices attached to his body. 2 consortium operatives were preparing their equipment. We use a combination of chemical and psychological techniques, Kane explained. Very effective on most species. Humans are particularly susceptible to certain neural stimulators. Interrogation began, but something was wrong. The chemicals that should have made Jake compliant and talkative seemed to have no effect. The psychological pressure techniques that worked on most beings only made him more determined to resist. After an hour of failed attempts, Kane was becoming frustrated. Increase the neural stimulator settings, she ordered through the intercom, but instead of breaking down, Jake started laughing. Is that the best you can do? He asked his interrogators. I've been through worse training exercises. Kane's face darkened. It seems Mr. Harrison has been conditioned to resist interrogation. No matter, we'll try more direct methods. She activated another intercom channel. Bring in the memory extractor. We'll get the information we need one way or another. Zaraketh knew this was her moment to act. The memory extractor was a dangerous device that could permanently damage Jake's mind. She could not let them use it on him. Director Kane, she said, I may have a better approach. Vorthok hunters have techniques for breaking resistant prisoners that don't rely on technology. Let me work on him for a few minutes. I guarantee he'll tell us everything we want to know. Kane considered this for a moment, then nodded. Very well. But if you fail, we use the memory extractor. Zaraketh entered the interrogation chamber and dismissed the other operatives. Once they were alone, she quickly freed Jake from his restraints and activated a small jamming device that would block the surveillance equipment for a few minutes. Are you ready? She whispered. More than ready, Jake replied, rubbing his wrists where the restraints had been. Let's finish this. They worked quickly to implement the plan they had rehearsed. Jake used his knowledge of the base's systems to access the main computer network through a hidden terminal in the interrogation room. While he worked, Zaraketh stood guard and monitored the corridor outside. I'm in, Jake said after a few tense minutes. Downloading all their files now. Communication records, financial data, operational plans, everything. How long will it take? It's 2 more minutes. The download is almost complete. But their time ran out faster than expected. Commander Vex appeared in the observation room and immediately noticed that something was wrong. Alarms began blaring throughout the base as security forces mobilized. To respond to the breach, download complete, Jake announced, pocketing the data storage device. Now we need to get out of here. They fought their way through the base's corridors. Using Zaraketh's superior combat skills and Jake's knowledge of the facility's layout to stay ahead of their pursuers, but more guards kept appearing, and it was clear they would soon be overwhelmed. This way, Jake said, leading them toward what looked like a dead end. But when they reached the wall, he activated a hidden panel that revealed an emergency escape route. How did you know about this? Zaraketh asked, as they crawled through the narrow tunnel. I helped design the security systems for facilities. Like this when I worked for the Federation, Jake replied. I always make sure to include a back door. The tunnel led to an unused docking bay on the far side of the asteroid. Jake's ship was waiting there, having been moved by an automated system he had programmed during their infiltration, as they escaped from the consortium base. Jake transmitted the stolen data to Federation authorities and news organizations across the galaxy. Within hours, the evidence of the Shadow Consortium's crimes was being broadcast on every major communication network. The planned attack on the Galactic Trade Summit was prevented. Law enforcement agencies began coordinating raids on consortium facilities throughout known space. Many of the missing hunters were found alive and rescued from hidden prisons. Victoria, Kane and her top lieutenants were arrested within days. The Shadow Consortium's network began to collapse as its members turned on each other to avoid prosecution. Later, as they watched the news reports from the safety of Jake's hidden base, Zaraketh turned to him with a question that had been bothering her. "You could have exposed the consortium months ago," she said. "Why did you wait? Why go through all this elaborate deception?" Jake was quiet for a moment before answering. "Because I needed someone I could trust to help me. Someone with the skills and determination to see this through to the end." The other hunters they targeted were skilled, but they were working alone. You were different. How was I different? You never gave up. Even when things didn't make sense, even when your instincts told you something was wrong, you kept pursuing the truth. That's not just hunter training, Zaraketh. That's character. Zaraketh felt something she had never experienced before. Among her people, being claimed by a worthy opponent was the highest honor a hunter could receive. It meant that someone had proven themselves superior not through strength alone, but through intelligence, courage, and skill.